Your daily meat bird update. Here they are. We're getting snow this weekend, so I'm really glad that we didn't take the time to move all 50 of them outside just to have to move them back in so they didn't freeze to death. The countdown is on. Only a couple more weeks. Meat birds again. We did have one die over the weekend. We're not really sure 100% what happened, but it looks like there might be two more in here that are having a rough time. This one right here, you can see how his leg's kicked out. He's actually got splayed leg. When he stands up and he tries to walk, it kind of looks like he's stumbling around drunk. And it's because that he can't get his legs directly underneath him. And this one over here, where you see it's breathing heavily, if you look at the skin underneath where you can see underneath the feathers, it's a little bit darker in color. I believe that has something to do with heart failure. So sometimes with these birds, because they gain so much weight so quickly, their heart can't support the needs of the body. So that could have been what happened to the other one too. I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's life with meat birds. So I literally took the water out for maybe 30 minutes. They had water when I came in here. They weren't completely out. But I had to take them out when I cleaned the pen and they needed to be filled. And you can see these birds automatically, as soon as I put them in, they run to it and they're gulping down water as fast as they can. That's one thing about these birds. As they get bigger and they get older, they do consume a lot of feed and water, which is why I have to clean the pen so much. So as their body's growing, they're literally eating, drinking, pooping, and sleeping. You can see as they're waddling around, they don't really want to go that far. I do think that putting them out on pasture is healthier for them. I find that we've had a lot less fatalities when we do that. Of course, I'm saying this as it's spitting snow out. We finished up the cord treatments on the animals that appeared to be infected. I didn't really like the look of the ram's fecal, and last year, I forgot, I actually had to treat him for it specifically when they were out on pasture. So I just treated him, so now I've got to do that for 4 more days. He doesn't like me that much, but see, if you look at the fecals down here, like this one is clumped up. It's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be more like pellets like that. So I think that one's his. So hopefully this will cure the rest of them, and then I'll run a fecal on him. He's exhibiting a lot more breeding type behaviors, and I'm very curious to see if he's going to catch these sheep for fall lambing. Normally we don't lamb until April or May, obviously, because of the weather's usually better. This year we lambed in January and February because I was expecting a baby in March, so I wanted it all to be done and out of the way. So technically they could lamb again in the fall, itch their backs on it, which helped to pull out the hair. So just like cows like being brushed with those roto brushes, you see videos of dairy cows that absolutely love it, and sheep are similar to that. They're not they don't have a really thick coat, most of them. This black one over next to him with the white spots, she's starting to shed out. This one's starting to shed out up by its neck, and it'll proceed to go down by its back. It is still super cold outside, so one thing that one person asked was, how do animals get coccidiosis if they're not outside? Because one thing I did say was that they're tiny little organisms that usually can survive or live, drop their eggs in the soil, and that's how the animals pick it up. So if you have animals on contaminated pasture, they can then be exposed to it, which is good. Again, as I explained before, it's good because they can develop a resistance to it, or they're more likely to fight it off when they are exposed to a higher rate or a higher amount of parasites, micro parasites. They're not really intestinal parasites. So being that the sheep are in a bedded pack, the cows really hypothetically could also pick it up. We haven't, knock on wood, had a problem with it. I have a feeling that once they start calving, we might have an issue with it, but they can pick it up in their bedding. So one way to prevent them from picking it up, if you have a feeling that it might be in the bedding or in the surrounding areas, obviously we've had a history of it, so I knew that it was around. but is to make sure that you don't feed them on the ground. So if you're feeding them grain, you should be feeding them in like troughs or in pans, and you shouldn't be throwing it directly on the ground. Even in the hay where it looks like there's no poop or no fecal material, there still is a chance that there could be an infestation basically in that bedding material. So anytime that you feed the animals, you want to make sure that you do it in a relatively clean environment. Again, we have dirty animals, so all animals are pretty much dirty creatures, and they poop wherever. So sometimes in the feed trough, you do have manure and fecal material in there, but you really want to have those preventative measures in place so that you lessen the chance of a bad infection. And any animal that is trained to grain or has a taste for it, a lot of my sheep and the goats and my cows, they're notorious for coming when you shake a bucket. So any animal that has a taste for grain like that, you know, they don't make that distinction. They see grain or they hear you drop it on the ground or see you drop it on the ground, and they're going to search for it until they find it, which means consuming undesirable things. We did preg check these cows right before, actually, the last day of school, before the closing due to COVID. We did have these cows preg checked, so I know that they're all bred, but they're all to the point in their pregnancy now where if I go up to them, you will actually feel that baby bounce back. So it doesn't hurt the baby, but this is, you know, how I grew up preg checking my cows, because we never hired the vet to come and ultrasound, and the baby's actually right here. So if I push on this part of her, I can feel it. And once they get closer and further in gestation, you can actually feel it, like you can see it sometimes moving. This might be digestion up here, but you can see them move and kick down here. Thank you, Fiona, for being my willing subject. And I have a chicken in the barn. Not really sure what she's doing or looking for. Might be looking to lay her eggs over in that straw pile. A few questions that I forgot to answer from late last week. I ran out of time the last few days to post. Yesterday I was cleaning out my classroom. So I know that one of the questions was, how long is a rabbit's gestation, or how long are they pregnant for? And it's usually on average around 31 days. Again, just like with any animal, there can be some variation to that, but generally it's around 31 days. Another one was, how long does it take the meat birds to get from chick or hatch to finish? And the answer to that was 8 weeks. You can vary anything from, I know that some people process them between 4 and 6 weeks to get smaller birds, and later, 12 weeks even with Cornish crosses, but usually you run into a lot of health issues. I know that those of you watching from Facebook, this doesn't really make much sense, but for those that are on Instagram, they're able to answer those questions, and I can see the responses to those questions. So the reason I'm doing this, once again, is because I am trying to get my students educated as best as I can with actual examples that I have at my house versus trying to lecture, something. And I'm actually pretty impressed with how much overall, even not my students, the other people that are on Instagram that have been answering these questions correctly or that are actually learning something through this. Another one of the questions was, what is a sheep's gestation length, or how long is a sheep pregnant for? And the answer was 5 months. And again, just from, the last week of randomly dropping information throughout my story, people have actually learned that, because a lot more of my students got that correct than the first time that I asked it. So they're either having really lucky guesses or I'm doing something right. Another question, what is coccidiosis, or what are cocci? And those were microscopic parasites. And again, a lot more people got that correct than previously. So they're not internal parasites, they're microscopic parasites that affect the cells and then wreak havoc on their digestive system. So yay, they're getting it right. And the last one was, which rooster is my favorite rooster? And the answer was the blue lace red, or splash lace red Wyandotte is my favorite. And I only have one of them, and it's based purely on looks alone. I don't have pet chickens. I did my first couple of years that I had them. I had a Delaware that was super sweet, and she would jump up on chairs and hang out on my shoulder while I was walking around. So after that, I never got any more Delawares once I got rid of her. They're a large body breed. They're white in color, and they have like black flecking up on their neck. And they are just a large breed, so they consume more feed, and they also take up more room in the chicken coop. So that becomes a problem when I'm trying to, at least make the chickens pay for them through selling eating eggs or hatching eggs. And if you have a large chicken or a very heavy breed type of hen that's going into those nesting boxes, she's more likely to crack the eggs, and that's actually a bad thing. So I don't normally have them. I also try to stay away from Jersey Giants as well, because if they crack the eggs, I can't sell them for eating or hatching, and I usually end up giving them to like relatives or to our friends like the Wolsons. Kevin usually ends up with them, if anybody knows Kevin.